I spent years looking at love through the lens of its material traces since prehistory until the past century. Before doing this, I had taken for granted that love was something abstract and shady and misty. But in fact, now I'm convinced that spades and shovels and the archaeological lab can retrieve quite a lot of it. Traces of feelings from the past trapped to this day in unexpected places and artifacts. They can still swipe us off our feet. And in fact, I argue that whenever we find fragments of past love, this means love has survived entirely. In a way, just like old buildings, ruins have much more to say to us than new buildings. 15 years ago, I discovered in the Roman layers of Troy a marble statuette face down in the ground. When I lifted it and turned it to me, I was confronted by an eros with broken wings. It was as if the flight was gone and all that was left was the weight. But I took it as an invitation to give that eros his wings back. So allow me to offer you now a bird's eye view of what remains of feelings over millennia. All of us here tonight in Parco della Musica are Homo sapiens. But most of us also have 2 to 4% genes from Homo neanderthalensis. Now, genes are just like the boss when you're ready to leave the office at 5 p.m. They have a story to tell. In this case, they testify beyond all doubt to sexual encounters between the two human subspecies during the 10,000 years or so of their coexistence in Europe, or maybe during previous migrations. I think it's uncomfortable to not be able to know how many of those encounters were the result of Paleolithic love and how many the result of Paleolithic rape, but I'm confident that love is a perfectly plausible explanation because we and the Neanderthals, we had a similar understanding of the two things that shape human character, death and jewelry. Interestingly, a few years ago, Neanderthal teeth from the Spanish cave at El Cidrón were analyzed, and on them were bacteria transmitted through saliva, potentially gotten by the Neanderthal from the sapiens through kissing. So kiss in the Paleolithic, tell in the 21st century. The oldest embrace preserved is coming from a cemetery in Valdaro, some 5,000 years ago. But while admiring how this Neolithic man and woman still hug each other dearly, we must not forget that in fact this embrace belongs to the community that buried them. Those left behind may have chosen to celebrate this love, so they arranged one's arms around the body of the other, but they may have faked it due to social necessities of the moment. Love thrives in privacy. Society demands display. It's different with the Iron Age skeletons in Hassanlu in today's Iran. This couple, possibly two males, died while hiding during an invasion of the armies from Urartu. Clearly, in this case, no one interfered with the final resting position. That's how they died, taking refuge in a niche, and then a burning building collapsed on top of them. Now, the question is, are we looking at the choreography of love? Is this a kiss? Or is it a coincidence or a struggle during the last few seconds of asphyxiation? Because when we look at those two skulls, we are hardwired to see a kiss. Sometimes we look at death and we see love. From ancient Egypt, we have countless letters between spouses preserved on papyrus. One wife writes, "Send the mattress for the kid." A man writes, Come join me, bring your golden jewelry. But then he anxiously instructs her not to wear them on the boat. Throughout late antiquity, we also find in Egypt clay voodoo-like figurines accompanied by lead tablets with erotic curses. One such curse asks all gods to make sure that Ptolemais does not have sex with any other men, regardless the position, 4th century AD, regardless the position, but with me, Sarap Amon. The italic equivalent of such inscriptions are the graffiti from Pompeii. Some of them are nothing short of obscene, but a few are quite lyrical. One says, one warns lovers, listen to me, those who love. I want to break Venus's ribs. Another explaining that whoever loves will waste a fortune on boys and girls was found in an identical form in Rome and in Germany. In other words, it had gone viral. Similar inscriptions concerning love and sex were found on the Viking site of Bergen in Norway, 13th century. Most of them are runic, of course, but one in Latin says, "For as long as you give, you shall be loved. When you stop giving, you'll be despised." We might be dealing with some broken Viking wings here. Also, ancient Greece. During banquets in ancient Greece, they had these cups, mixing bowls, all of them painted, and we see scenes from erotic myths that actually diverge from what we know of those myths from the written sources. We see Andromeda throwing stones at the sea monster that attacks her, so actively supporting her supposed savior, Perseus. We see Aphrodite hurling pots at the wild boar attacking her lover Adonis. So both of these women are so much less passive in the vase painting than in the actual myth. But what about the paradigmatic couple of Adam and Eve? We see them in frescoes, in catacombs, nude, separated by a fig tree, pomegranate tree, apple tree. This must be the most awkward nude paintings ever. We see them on sarcophagi, hugely embarrassed after the fall. Sometimes all they can do is shake hands in the contractual manner of Roman funerary art. Other times they are accompanied by symbols of the labor they are now sentenced to, baskets of grain, sheep, as if the late antique sculptor wants to send the message, work might fix your relationship. So the only ancient representation that I'm aware of Adam and Eve in bed has been preserved in a copy in mosaic in the Basilica di San Marco, 13th century. We see Adam and Eve in this luxurious bed, but they are lifeless, they are cringing. The bed itself is more of a mausoleum than a paradise. A paradise could have been the first city founded by Columbus in the Americas. 1494, Columbus founds the city of La Isabela in the island of Hispaniola, what is today the Dominican Republic. But Columbus has arrived there with 1,500 men and basically no women. We know nothing from the written documents of the family lives of these sailors. But archaeologically, investigating the cemetery in La Isabela, we found some of these women. In one of them, with this ritually elongated skull, which was typical of the Caribbean population, the local Taino population, she was buried as a Christian near the church. Also in her grave was the skeleton of her newborn, arguably the first child ever to be born to a European and to an American. In the graves of other Spaniards left behind when the city was abandoned were sea snails of the Strombus type, typical for the Taino funerary rituals, so they may have been buried by their wives. The story goes on and on. Allow me to offer you a few more examples. The world's best-selling writer spent more than 30 years on archaeological excavations out of love for her husband. Agatha Christie worked in Iraq, in Syria. She worked as a photographer. for the excavations of Max Mallowan. She even works in the ancient city of Nimrud in the restoration of artifacts, of ivory gilded statuettes, and in her diary she recounts how she used her face cream to clean these statuettes. So this is maybe what they mean when they say that love can push you to the greatest achievements. There's also a famous painter, metaphysical and surrealist painter, Giorgio de Chirico, who was married to an archaeologist. She eventually worked in Ostia, 1 hour drive from here. The statues of sleeping Ariadne feature in more than 100 of de Chirico's paintings. She copied them from actual ancient statues in the Louvre and in the Vatican, because he knew that these statues of the sleeping princess from Crete were erotically charged, because Ariadne falls asleep after being abandoned by Theseus, her lover, and is found asleep by her future partner, Dionysus. One final example, some 20 years ago, archaeologists dug up a First World War common grave in northern France, in Fromelles. Australian soldiers were there. One of them had on him this heart-shaped leather pouch with what remained of a photo, just lint, basically, and another tinier pouch with a lock of hair and a letter. Another Australian soldier had this badge, so-called boomerang badge, inscribed, "Return to me." Clearly, the archaeology of love is a bittersweet endeavor. But the takeaway from all of this is that everything is in fact preserved. We labor under the illusion that time erases everything, everything vanishes. But no, nothing disappears without a trace. You just have to know where to look for it. And this material trace, be it of bronze, of pottery, limestone, silk, whatever, this material trace can rekindle everything that was spiritual, metaphysical, emotional. All that people have felt in the past is paradoxically preserved and flows into what we feel today. Thank you.